As we continue to mine down on this question, the primary factor is that the single most powerful piece of knowledge necessary for educators to understand regarding how to improve student learning is to know how students learn. And you'll notice that I use the word how. It's not first in the standards, not that standards are wrong. And this knowledge is not available in curricula, not that good, robust curricula is not what we need for our kids. Acquiring this knowledge begins with an even more fundamental question. What is the most important skill that we can teach our children that is related to academic success? As you think about the answer to the question, virtually everybody will say something on the order, well, we need to make sure that our children learn how to read. And broadly interpreted, that's absolutely correct. More specifically, children need to understand how to process the language of all content area instruction, and that is the English language, either oral or written. Just a quick little paradigm for your reference. In order to understand the precursors or what the predicates are for being able to do well in school in the area of language arts or reading instruction, ultimately being able to comprehend everything that they read or hear, consider this paradigm. It's what we call a paradigm of integration. And it begins from a science standpoint all the way down to the fundamental sensory systems in the human brain. We call that sensory cognitive functions. And these are the functions that underlie literacy skills and all academic performance. And if you look carefully at this, what you'll see is as more of these come online, fundamentally in our brains, we need to process information auditorily. In the case of written language, we need to have phonological awareness, which leads to, for example, good word attack skills. We need to be able to process the visual appearance, the sounds, not only the sounds, but the letters or the corresponding letters that go with it. And that's referred to as orthographic processing, leading to, for example, good sight words, word recognition, and of course leading to fluency in decoding. Above and beyond that, we also need to have students who are skilled in their contextual reading, and their language base to include vocabulary. But all those in isolation, or even if all of those are working in concert to one another, there's still not a guarantee that students are going to be able to comprehend what they read and or hear. There's a new standard, and this standard, in the research that we've been conducting along with a number of other organizations, institutions of higher learning, research institutions, is that in the educational research, we think that we now have evidence that the standard should be that language and literacy are cognitive acts. They're just not a matter of sounding out words on the page. That language and therefore language and literacy instruction should be based on a theory of cognition, not just on a theory of linguistics. And if we look at how students and some of the representative of these kinds of skills that we're talking about, for example, very common feature in reading instruction today, phonemic awareness, the ability to auditorily perceive the identity, number, and sequence of sounds within words. Beyond that, we think that students on the orthographic side need to have intact symbol imagery, the ability to visualize sounds and letters in words. And equally, if not more important, what we call concept imagery, the ability to create an image gestalt or whole from oral and written language. Why is that important? If you think back to the Venn diagram or that the slide that had the sensory integration kind of information on there, an integrated paradigm of reading, the one that surrounds all of the other components of phonemic awareness, orthographic awareness, a good language development is the ability to comprehend what it is that we read and hear. Frequently, that's an assumption that's made for students in school, especially if they already have good decoding skills. What we would like to suggest that if you're looking at compulsory education as we know it, if you will, you can call it the K-12 pipeline. What are the primary causes of the failure to progress a year for a given year in school? If you look at this little diagram, for example, for a child in the 3rd grade, they're beginning to fall behind. What would contribute to the fact that the slope on their learning curve actually becomes flattened as more school goes by? The answer to that goes back to our fundamental questions. If we don't understand how students learn, if we don't understand the precursors to how it is that they learn, and then address those issues in a school environment, then we have no chance of closing the achievement gap. So to mine this finally just a little more deeper, what are the three primary variables we need to control for if we're clearly trying to understand how to manifest our behavior in schools as we work with children? The first two, differential diagnosis and assessments. This is more or less a medical model. If your child is not well, we need to run a diagnosis and see what the nature of his or her problem is. Number two, once we know what the issue or issues are, then we customize the intervention. If this sounds familiar to those of you who might be looking at this little presentation, this essentially is an RTI model. You look at the processes of why the child can't learn, understanding how it is that they need to learn, and then customize an intervention for them. But are these enough? The third variable is multifaceted, and it's extremely complicated. And where turnaround or transformational models in schools are concerned, this one turns out to be a critical issue. Here are some of the primary components that fall into this necessity for environmental modifications. A, highly competent teachers. The biggest variable in the environment that we know is necessary that's going to be predictably related to student academic success is not only the singular but the aggregate competencies of teachers, particularly in the area as related to teaching reading. Number two, are principals instructional leaders? Are they supporting the teachers and the building environment in such a way that it's conducive to student learning? Do schools have the latitude to increase the amount of time of the intervention? Research has just come out that clearly shows the importance of intensive intervention for students who are in a situation of at-risk reading behavior. What is the extent to which the community that surrounds the school is involved? And finally, data-driven, student-centered instruction and decisions. If we have a good, robust science of understanding why students are not learning to their greatest potential, and we have an instructional science as to what we need to do about it, then how do we use the data to inform instructions? Are these enough? Unfortunately, it's not. It all has to be managed in collaboration with the learning community, where everybody's on the same page. The social dynamics of the schools that we've been involved in absolutely necessitate not only all these parts being in place in schools, but they're all managed and worked together in concert one with another.